climate. I'm your host, Jada, and every week I'll be sitting down with leaders in the field who are shaping the future of human resources through cutting edge technology. We'll be discussing trends, hot topics, and best practices to not only land that job, but be successful in it. So, whether you're the ones hiring or looking to be hired, you're in the right place for all of the tips and tricks. So, sit back, relax, grab your chink of choice, and let's get into it. This is From the Desk with Jada Montemurano, where we bring the hottest HR news from the desk right to you. And today we're joined by an absolute force in the DEI space, Rocki Howard, the founder and chief diversiologist at Diversiology. With over 20 years of experience in the diversity and inclusion space, Rocki's all about helping other DEI leaders with resources and actionable solutions. Now, she's not only a thought leader, she's an inspirational speaker, content creator, and the host of 2 podcasts, Grown Women Wednesday and The Voices of Diversity. So if you're looking for real talk on DEI leadership or just showing up as your fullest self, Rocki is the one to listen to. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rocki, especially with the current news cycle that we're in.
Hey, Jada, thank you so much for having me. I hope people have their drink. I have mine. We're going to need some caffeine to get through this conversation.
Yes, of course. And this is the perfect time to have you on because we're starting off with the breaking news from last week that President Donald Trump signed that executive order to end DEI programs. And I just want to know, with your leadership in this space, what are your initial thoughts of all of this happening right now?
Yeah, and you know what? And we can talk about that. President Trump signed multiple orders last week that impact either DEI programs within the federal government or impacting our employees in multiple ways and multiple dimensions of diversity. And I will tell you, my initial response could best be described by the quote that Craig Minnick, the brother of the police officer that was killed during the insurrection, said. And he said when President Trump pardoned the people who were involved in the January 6th riot, insurrection, he said it when he felt like that was a betrayal of human decency. I feel like some of the executive orders that were put through last week were a betrayal of human decency. It also, I'm hoping, is just a lot of rhetoric. Some of them are out of scope for what can be done. And so as practitioners, as allies, as ERG leaders, as someone who just gives a damn about human-centered workforces, we all need to keep up to date with what's going on and how we are best positioned to handle it.
And you did send out an insider report from your company, kind of breaking all of this down, right? So if we can kind of just start from what does this executive order specifically about the DEI programs mean? I know some companies are saying they're following it, they're not following it. Federal agencies have to. So just to start off from your expertise, what does that executive order mean moving forward for these employees, for these companies, just in general?
Yeah. So I will do 2 things. If you aren't on our mailing list, you can follow Diversiology on LinkedIn. And we have a newsletter that's called Insider's Report. And what Jada is referring to is this week, that report had 10 different actions that have been taken in less than a week. I wrote the darn thing on Friday or Saturday, and it had started on the 20th in less than a week. So please feel free to join us, and we'll have more content as this continues to evolve. When you look at the first executive order, which was the rescission of federal DEI programs. This policy change terminates all DEI initiatives within federal agencies, including office closures, canceled grants, and it was the elimination of performance requirements. So if you work within the federal government, and there was in one of these parts and if you see someone else doing it, you tell on them. So that's pretty scary to us. So if you're in a DEI role within the federal government, this executive order is shutting all of that down, right? What we do need to be clear about is this does not impact corporate DEI initiatives. It certainly is a signal that we should look to, we should be very concerned about, but be clear the executive order was specifically around federal programs.
And just to start with the federal aspect of it, and then we can get to the corporation. So that means if you have a DEI job, you are most likely losing that job. And then what does that mean for just the different federal agencies as a whole? They're not going to be looking for diversity include, like, what does this mean as a whole, not only for the people that will most likely lose their jobs in that role?
Well, what's really interesting is if you look at the presidential action, it's called Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programmings and Preferencing. And so that is the perspective of President Trump. And so he's saying if you work within the federal government and you are doing, and you are in a role that's very specific to DEI, he perceives that as being wasteful and those roles will be eliminated. There is lots of questions because there's various extensions of that. We also know we just had a new head of the EEOC positioned, which is a Trump ally. So how does this impact EEOC? We also know that there's other executive orders relating back to, hold on, I don't want to misspeak because we do need to talk about these things, but there was also the rescission of Executive Order 11246, which removes affirmative action obligations for federal contractors. And this was originally established to prohibit discrimination and promote diversity. So we've got two very impactful orders or rescission of orders that are happening at the same time. I don't know that we all know exactly what this means. I believe that this was done to incite fear in all of us who are doing work. I believe that President Trump wanted to have orders on day one that had real impact, that could show his constituency that he was going to live up to the promises that he made during his campaign. So no one should be shocked or surprised by this. I think there's a bigger question, though, of all of the things that are going on in the world, of all of the things that need to be addressed in the world, of all of the problems we as human beings have in the world, is really the one that's the number one problem, our desire to create high performing, human centered workplaces and experiences for human beings. Why is this so wrong? And why is this at the top of Trump's list? And was this done to appease his constituency and the people who are invested in him? Or is this going to be real and be very indicative of what we're going to see over the next 4 years?
Yeah, I live in Los Angeles right now, and we currently can't buy eggs. So there's a lot of other things that we need
Right.
to be focusing on. And I have to be my unbiased journalistic self and be the devil's advocate here. Do you see any other positive reasons for this happening? Do you see any other, just to, see the other side of things, do you see any positives that could come out of this at all?
Well, I do think that there are some positives that will come out of it. I'm a glass half full type of person. And I think that when we look at the anti-DEI rhetoric and movement that's happened over the last, we've been facing this for the last 6, 8, 9, 10 months. Here's some of the things that are coming out of it. The companies who were doing this to be performative and check a box in a marketing box, we're getting to know who those are for sure. The companies who are in it for the long haul are starting to step forward and say, we believe that this is important and we're going to continue to challenge, even when our boards say that we shouldn't. I think it challenges those of us who are practitioners to go, how can we make sure that our initiatives are not just feel good, kind of event planning things, but that they are part of the overall business objectives of our organizations, that they're part of the overall business strategy, that we understand how this impacts the people in our organization in a very real, data measured way. It's forcing us to step our game up. It's forcing us not to lean on acronyms that we've always leaned on, but to be able to say what we're really trying to do is to create inclusive, equitable environments for all dimensions of diversity. It's forcing us to rethink how we educate, how we explain. It's forcing us to maybe look at a new way of helping organizations bring in inclusion throughout throughout the talent management life cycle and really operationalize it and not have it be like this kind of checkbox that is really very easily pulled apart and very easily mistaken for quotas or, what was it? What did I say? He said, like, it's not,
You said
um,
wasteful? Wasteful?
yes, wasteful, correct? It's forcing those of us who do that work to really help people and for us to have deeper strategies and more integrated strategies that get the outcomes that we want while showing people the ROI. It's challenged us a bit. And I do believe that that will be a positive outcome to all of this.
And speaking on that, we spoke federally the impact, but you did mention the private companies. We know, like Costco, for one, came out and said, we're sticking with our DEI initiatives, where Target was like, yeah, we're getting rid of it.
Yeah.
What kind of battle goes on in a company to decide whether they're going to keep it or not? Why would companies get rid of it? Is it because they're saying, okay, we can save some money here now that we're allowed? What do you think with the private sector is going on right now?
Yeah. I think, excuse me. So when we saw the spike in DEI practitioners in 2020 on the back of George Floyd's murder, it was really interesting because I remember personally being very angry and very concerned. Angry because, quite frankly, George Floyd's murder, while horribly tragic, was not new to the Black community. These are things that we had been seeing for years. And it felt like it was the kind of the apex of COVID and people being home and this horrible tragedy. And then people needed something to do to feel better. And they jumped onto kind of this diversity bandwagon where those of us who have been practitioners understand that this is a discipline. It is work. It is not the latest trend. It wasn't a movement. It wasn't a moment, right? Like this was real work that needed to be done. And so I think I always knew that that momentum that we saw then wasn't sustainable because we were hiring DEI leaders. I benefited from one. I took a chief diversity officer role during that time, but we were hiring for roles without clear expectations for what would be done, what would be the outcome. When I work with clients, I really talk about when you're implementing DEI, how does this align with your business imperatives and your business strategy? How does this align with your human imperatives and how your human strategy? Because if it's not aligned with both, we see that that erodes over time. And I think that that's what we're seeing now. I think lots of companies did it for their business imperatives, and it was a marketing ploy. Like everyone's doing it. I have to do it. So I'm going to do it. And they didn't know how it fit into their long-term business strategy. Why were they adopting DEI principles? What did that look like in the scope of their organization? What did they want to accomplish? Where were they then? Where were they at the point that they started? Where did they want to get to? What was the gap? What was the strategy that was going to get them there? None of that work was done. It was, I hired a chief diversity officer, check. I made a donation to this organization, check. It must be good. And then we had lots of chief diversity officers, me included in certain cases, where you feel like I've been hired, I report to the CEO, I'm at the right seat in the table. Okay, now what's my budget? Don't have a budget. Where's my team? Don't have a team. Where is my authority to be able to affect change throughout the organization? Well, you could come to the executive team meetings. And so we were never really well positioned to be able to do this. Now, several of us were able to make it past that hump. But there you go. And I think that was the first gap in the problem. So I'm not surprised that we're here now. The question is, what do we do moving forward?
And I will get to that question with you, but there's something that I want to tackle first for people who may be listening who are in that camp of thinking this is wasteful, or companies that added these DEI initiatives just to check a box but didn't do anything with it. Can you explain for everybody what DEI is, what these initiatives should be if implemented correctly and done the right way?
Yeah. I said this last week. I was on a call and it seemed to resonate with people. So I'm just going to kind of repeat it from this perspective. What company doesn't want a diverse team of talent that represents the clients that it serves and the communities that it works in, working with them to help increase productivity, help increase innovation, to help increase market share, and those people that are working for them, they're treating equitably, and those people feel included so that they continue to retain and produce the best work for that organization because they feel like they're truly valued, and they were hired not specifically because they were diverse, but because they were diverse and they were the best candidate for the job. But because the company widened their pool of candidates and took their time, and they understood that having a diverse candidate and a quality candidate and qualified candidate are not mutually exclusive. I mean, it's really that simple. And when you look at Gen Z, which is the most diverse generation that we've seen in the workforce, if you look at the statistics for 2044, which is not that far away, that says the majority is going to be the minority, minority are going to be the majority. And if you look at the latest statistics around employee engagement, which is at an all-time low, if you look at the statistics around trust in organizations, which are at an all-time low, why wouldn't you want to make sure that you have specific initiatives that are dedicated to understanding all the dimensions of diversity that happen in your organization and how you effectively engage those people so that you retain them?
So I guess going into that moving forward, there's kind of two sectors, right? So we'll start with the one of companies, businesses, employees that are still going to have their DEI initiatives, that they're not
Mhm.
getting rid of them. What are the actionable items they should be doing to make sure that they are doing it the right way and not just checking a box?
Yeah. Um, that is hours and days of work to be able to answer, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But what I would say first is, again, we have our reflect or our reflection framework when we teach organizations how to build a strategy. And it's really review what you are trying to accomplish. Why is DEI important to your organization? Again, how does it align with your business imperative and your human imperatives? What is it that you want to accomplish? You need to really be able to evaluate the gap between where you are today and where you want to be, and really be able to create a roadmap on what the experience through the talent management life cycle is like. We call that inclusivity aptitude. Right? You have to forecast your resources. Part of the reason why we struggled is that diversity practitioners, ERG leaders, allies, they don't have enough resources, time, expertise, budget, people. That's why we built Diversiology, to fill a gap there. So, really look and reflect on the resources that you're able to, that you have, that will help you to be able to look at the strategy. And then you leverage all of that to create a strategy. You execute a plan. You actually, you look at communicating that plan effectively, and then you test to see if the things that you're doing are actually having impact. That was a really quick example, but our reflect methodology kind of helps you really think about, I'm not doing performative work, I'm doing work that makes sense in the context of my organization and having real impact on both our business and, most importantly, our people.
And now moving forward with the companies that maybe are getting rid of these programs, is there a way for the current employees, maybe leaders in that company, to continue making inclusive environments and equitable environments without like the formal DEI program in place?
Absolutely. Like, the truth is, most of us DEI leaders would tell you that our goal is to work ourselves out of a job because it shouldn't be separate. It should be integrated into normal HR policies and practices. It should be integrated in terms of how leaders are showing up. And so, absolutely, the principles that we use as DEI practitioners, we don't work unless the leaders in the organization and the day-to-day managers are carrying those forward. And so in its quite simplest terms, I would say just remember that this is based on treating people with dignity and human respect and having a clear understanding of your own biases as leaders, learning how to interrupt them. You will never get rid of bias. You have to realize to recognize them and to interrupt them, and to remember that this is really about creating humanity practices. How are you making sure all of the people who work for you are felt and treated like they're human beings, and that there's a place for them, and that you see them, you hear them, and you want to meet them where they are to create an experience for them at work that makes sense.
And a lot on this show, we end up talking about the innovations of technology, AI now in the HR world. And I know you have experience in the HR tech side of things as well. And you spoke about the bias when hiring. And a lot of people I speak with on here say AI tries to eliminate that. So do you think in our new ways of hiring with this new technology, will that help hire more inclusive people and more backgrounds without that bias? Do you think that's a little part of it as well to help?
Absolutely. Like, I know that there's lots of debates, and we should be careful about AI, and we should make sure that we are using AI responsibly. And we should make sure that the tech we're using is built by people who believe in those same policies and principles. But I want to remind you that human beings are biased too. And so you have human beings that are hiring that are biased, and you're trying to teach them not to be biased. And sometimes you can't teach them at the same scale that you could correct the AI that's able to help them and identify some of those problems. And so I am a big advocate of AI, and some of my, favorite tools that we use in the hiring process, and some of the organizations that I'm an advisor for, are AR centered and centric. And so whether it's informed decisions that looks at how managers behave throughout the interview process by their video interviews, if it's the team over at EQ where they're helping the recruiters through AI through the process, whether it's the team at Textio that uses AI both in the language in the job descriptions and then taking it through in the talent life cycle and making sure that feedback is equitable. This all helps us do things at scale. And even at Diversiology, a lot of the content that we create, we use AI to help us to do that so that we can get you resources that are affordable and at scale. And so I think we can't move forward with this in the way that we need to without AI. We just need to make sure we are auditing and making sure it hasn't having adverse impact.
And we could talk for hours about all of these subjects, as you mentioned before, when I've been asking your questions. So, as we're wrapping up the conversation here, in that insider report that you sent out, are there any other items or orders that came through that specifically will be impacting employees or employers moving forward? Obviously, we focused a lot on the DEI executive order that came out, but was there anything else in there kind of generally you'd want people to know about during this HR world?
For sure, there was the rescission of federal DEI programs, the elimination of affirmative action requirements, the restriction of birthright citizenship, the suspension of refugee admissions, enhanced immigration enforcement. There was the redefinition of gender recognition. So we are only going to be recognizing two sexes, which is a horrible step backwards for the LGBTQ community. We now have a Secretary of Defense who has point blank said he does not support women in the military. And we've had the withdrawal from international agreements, which can impact us too. And what I want to say, I know that we're closing out. This is a lot of information to absorb. And I also understand that it can have an impact on your mental and physical health as well if you're a practitioner. Please engage as you can, but prioritize your mental health. Don't overreact. Do not run around to every time you hear something. Take a breath, do the research, understand, belong to a community, hopefully like ours, but be ready to think about how this impacts your work, and don't get so caught up on what it's been in the past, but try to figure out how to be flexible and adaptable so the principles of DEI, which are all about creating human-centered workplaces, still exist and your work is impactful.
And I always like to end the show talking about the future, looking forward. And in this case, it may not be such a positive future we're looking to. And it may be hard for you to generalize here, but where do we go from here? Where do companies, employers, people working in HR go from here to make sure that they are staying inclusive and keeping our workplaces equitable? Are there any maybe last little tidbits or actionable items that people can take away with today?
Well, I think you stay focused. I think you're really clear on the work that you're doing and you don't run with fear. You really are very thoughtful about what is the work that I need to do to make sure that my employees are genuinely and authentically feel engaged, that they're receiving equal pay, that we're doing things equitably in our organization, that we're attracting a diverse talent pool, that we're making sure that our processes are accessible to all, and that we continue to do that work to develop all of our employees, and that we close the gaps when we see systemic problems. That's what you'd want any HR team to do. And you don't have to necessarily call that work something different, but the work still needs to get done.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This was such an important conversation during such a timely time in the world. And I know we couldn't get to everything today, but I appreciate your insight, and hopefully people will take away a lot from this conversation today.
Jada, thank you so much for making space for the conversation and for doing breaking news. We need you.
Yes, I'm so glad we were able to get this in right now. This is really important information for everyone out there. And for everyone out there listening, thank you so much for joining us as well. You can catch us every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. If you're hungry for other Purple Acorn shows, you can head to purpleacornnetwork.com and Purple Acorn on LinkedIn. I will see you next time on From the Desk with me, Jada Montemarano.